Welcome to Under Pressure, the podcast about becoming better men when it counts. I'm Cody Laughlin.
And I'm Brian Alfaro. Each week, we have honest conversations about building businesses, leading families, carrying responsibility, and the pressure that comes with trying to do all of it well. If that sounds like your world, you're in the right place.
No hype, no pretending we've got it all figured out, just real stories, real struggles, and what we're learning along the way. Let's get into it.
What's up, Cody? We're back.
We are back, man. Good afternoon. How you doing this week?
I'm doing awesome, living the dad life. Got good stuff going on this weekend. Weather's warming up here in Houston. It's already in the mid 80s. Already starting my summer complaints.
Yeah, it's sad because my kids went outside the other day and it was like 83 and they're like, oh my God, it's so hot. And I'm like, oh Lord, it's not even.
You're not ready.
It's
You're
not even
ready.
ready yet. So it's here though.
Yeah. That weather will hit you hard and make you feel like you're getting a setback in life, especially as you get older. That heat kind of hits you. It's like the cold hits you. You start hearing like, oh man, my bones are kind of aching. But when it gets hot outside, it starts hitting you too, getting a little bit more tired. But I think that's a good spin off into a good topic we want to talk about today, and that's big financial setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have both had things in life. We're both entrepreneurs at heart, right? And anytime you're an entrepreneur, your success is often built on a mountain of failures. I'm not sure who said that, but we've referenced that several times, that iceberg model. And below the water, everyone sees a tip. Below the water is a mountain of failures, missed opportunities, financial setbacks, bankruptcies for some people, divorces. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that can kind of happen on your journey as a man to that success, whatever your definition of success is. So I think that's a good segue for today to talk about some setbacks. And for you in particular, I know you have a really powerful story of some opportunities that maybe didn't pan out when you were much younger. Not that you're super old, but just younger in life and hadn't been pursuing real estate quite yet. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and to kind of expand on your comment to open, I think as guys and as men, as entrepreneurs, we tie a lot of our success in life to the financial decisions we make. And when those decisions are fruitful and things turn out well, we feel proud about ourselves. We feel elevated. And when things don't work out very well, we do tend to carry that burden very heavily. And I don't know about others that may be tuning in or how you felt about the times when things didn't go well. But I know for me personally, there has been a lot of feelings of failure, guilt. I would venture to say maybe even some depression here and there, just because you feel like, you're just not being successful is very hard. And I've alluded to this before in prior episodes, right? Where I'm very competitive and I hate to lose, and I hate making decisions that impact not just myself, but people around me, and particularly my family. And, my story that I'm going to share today encompasses that, because, the decisions that I've made that have led to financial shortcomings have not only impacted myself, but impacted my wife, my kids, my family. It's set us back. At one point we were really, really stressed out because we felt like we were going to be on the brink of losing our shirt. And that was very difficult to overcome. So the financial decision is hard enough as it is, right? But it's the relationship with your spouse, in my case, my wife, that was put to the test. And that was a hard experience to go through. So like I said, it's one of many. I think that's just part of being an entrepreneur. You're going to make a lot of decisions that don't always pan out, but as long as you stay in the game, you learn from those lessons. But ultimately, you have enough battle scars to share. So this is one of many for sure. But the one that I really wanted to speak to was really my first true attempt at opening a business, a true business. And this was probably 12 years ago now. At the time, I was, much younger. I was in my mid-20s, and I was You
knew everything. Like our previous episode we talked about. At that age, you know everything.
Yeah, well, my ego and ambitions for sure were a lot bigger than what I was prepared for sure. But I was very big into fitness. I still am today. I think we've talked about that. I've always been into fitness, but I had this passion and desire to start and own my own business. And so I found an opportunity that merged those two passions or desires together. So I came across this franchise opportunity that was a fitness franchise, and I won't name the franchise, but it had a credible brand behind it that was recognizable from another sport that I was a big fan of. And it married this gym concept that I was also really intrigued by. I thought it was a really great concept. It kind of infused the basics of mixed martial arts into just general strength training. And I thought it was just going to be a great opportunity. And I stumbled across this opportunity. I tried doing some due diligence and what I thought at the time was enough, but clearly it wasn't. Um, but I jumped in. I jumped all in, and I was committed, man. And my like I said, the it was just like a no brainer to me. It was just an absolute no brainer, and I just felt like, man, this was it. This was going to be the ticket out. Right. And we got started. I had a couple partners along the way that some guys that I knew really well. I would definitely call them friends. And, I shared this concept with them and shared the vision and what I was hoping to achieve. And collectively, amongst the four of us, we decided, hey, we're going to take this project on. But I, as part of the value proposition, said, look, I'm going to front the cost of this franchise fee, which was 50 grand. And I'm going to go front all of the upfront costs to getting this thing off the ground and getting started. And their capital contributions would come later. And that's another story we'll get to in a little bit. I signed the franchise agreement, 50 grand, and it was immediately hitting the ground running. The objective was, this was a multi-unit franchise agreement. So I was obligated to open 3 within a 3-year time period. And we immediately began the search for a space for our first unit. And the first milestone was to get the first unit open. I believe it was in the first 90 days. So it was no time to waste. It was immediately hit the ground running, start looking at commercial leases, start looking at spaces. And I immediately started getting my first roadblock because, number one, I had no experience at all looking at commercial leases, understanding what goes behind securing a commercial lease. And this particular gym concept the design of it was an 8,000 square foot concept, which is not a massive gym, but it's still a significant size. That's a lot of
Mhm.
space to fill up with equipment. And what I also didn't know until we started getting into the property searches was the landlords view any type of fitness business as a very high risk business. And so they typically would command a very high personal guarantee to back that lease. So that was another roadblock we started running into immediately was we were getting pushback from a lot of the landlords that were requiring these large personal guarantees. I'm talking $750,000 to back this lease up, which I had nowhere close to a net worth to even secure that. And then I was trying to search, in addition to that, the equipment that I was going to need to fill this space, which also had to be financed, which also meant there had to be additional capital to be injected to put down as down payments to finance that equipment.
Got it. So I want to stop you real quick, Cody, because I think there's some important nuggets in here that I've heard this story before, but I want to make sure our listeners take away from. So a couple of things. It sounds like early on your passion, well, first of all, your youth, your energy, your inexperience at life, and your mid 20s was definitely playing a role in this. So, we're not telling anyone out there who's in their mid 20s and excited about starting a business or anything that they can't do it. But it sounds like you were moving a little bit too fast and there wasn't enough due diligence done on a lot of these things that you're starting to sort of peel back the onion on, like the commercial real estate, for example, right? You had no experience with that. It doesn't sound like the franchisor was doing a lot of assistance there. And if they were, you still, you're deer in the headlights either way. But your passion and your energy and your excitement and your inexperience probably at that time, I'm imagining when you're signing that dotted line and wiring $50,000 was always scary no matter what, no matter how much money you have. But you probably felt like unstoppable. You probably felt like this was going to be it. Like you said, this was going to be the ticket to your financial freedom, a big stepping stone for your family. And what we're kind of hearing and finding out about that now is that it sounds like very, very quickly, almost like the next day, you're like, whoa, what did I get into? Maybe I should have slowed down a little bit because 90 days is doesn't sound like a lot of time, but that is a tremendous, that's a 100 miles an hour. That's not a 40-hour week. That's going all in pretty fast, and, if you're not prepared for that and you're not financially prepared for that, which is what you're talking about now, can lead you down a rabbit hole that, gets really hard to get out of. And yeah, so just, keep telling us a little bit more about the story. But I just wanted to highlight that, moving too fast seems to, we've learned this in real estate too as well. Moving too fast, often tends to break things.
Yeah, well, your ambition and egos being too large can sometimes cloud your judgment as well. Like you said, I was betting on myself and relying on my own work ethic and my own ambition, thinking that that was going to be enough to get me through, and that was anything but the case for sure. And once that pressure cooker really started to turn on and really started to mount, it became quite a humbling turn of events for sure, because all of a sudden that ego and ambition you realize is absolutely nothing. It's not going to carry you through whatever endeavors you try to do. So, fast forward, I'll try to make this long story short, because that kind of laid the foundation of the challenges I had, because that was the recurring theme. It was trying to find the right space that was financially within our means, finding the right footprint that we could appropriately build out and accommodate, so we can get to a more clear path to cash flow once the business was open. And I spent about 3 years before getting to the end and finally having to determine that there was no way that this was going to happen for me. Along those 3 years, my business partners that I had in this opportunity had all walked away, rightfully so. I mean, it was things weren't moving, things weren't looking like they were going to come to fruition. And so they decided to pursue other opportunities. But at the end of it, I was the one left holding the financial burden, because I had fronted all of those costs. Right. And here's what makes it really worse. And here's where the financial burden really started to hit, is when I first committed to the franchise agreement, I didn't have the liquidity to write a $50,000 check. I had to leverage my credit and go secure lines of credit in the amount of nearly $150,000 for that was going to be utilized for both the franchise fee and some of the operating costs once the unit did get open. So that way we can cover operating expenses until we did begin cash flowing, right? Sounded logical at the time. The shortfall is I also took out some of that capital off those lines of credit to pay for the installments on those lines of credit as the bills were coming in until we got the units open. And the plan was, okay, once the units are open and revenue's coming in, that will be absorbed under the operating expenses of the business. But without a business, here it is, I'm getting hit every month with these credit card statements and these line of credit statements that were coming due. And most of them had about, let's say, 12 to 18 month interest free. But when the interest started piling up and they were all at like 23, 25, 29%, now all of a sudden I found myself in a huge financial hole on a monthly basis, because these costs were exceeding the cost of my home mortgage.
Mhm.
And luckily I still had my job. I was still maintaining a full-time job throughout that entire timeline. However, my income was not increasing near the amount for my job that I needed to cover the cost of these rising interest expenses. And I got buried for like the next 10 years trying to recover from that loss, trying to recover and make up for those, that interest burden that was piling on. And when I tell you, the feeling of feeling buried in debt was a real thing. And not only that, but like I said, I leveraged my credit, which was amazing at the time that I took all those lines of credit out. But at the end of 3 years and pulling out nearly, let's say about I guess it's about $100,000 at the time of capital off those lines of credit, my credit was shot. My credit went from being like nearly 800 to below 600. And so now not only did I have this mounting burden of interest debt that I was having to assume on a monthly basis, I also couldn't go out there and do anything financial because my credit was ruined. because of this. So, like I said, it took me 10 years to get over that hurdle. And there was multiple things that I did along the way that were heavy lessons learned. I had to hire a debt consultant to help me rid my credit, or at least improve my credit enough to where I can go out and take out a personal loan, consolidated that debt with a much lower interest rate, single loan. And then for the next subsequent years after that, I had to really put all of my effort into chipping away and paying off that mountain of debt to get that off of our personal balance sheet, because it was burying us. And I mentioned to you this before, where some of the financial decisions we make can take a real toll on our families. My wife took this very hard. And for me, if I was by myself, you and I've talked about this offline, right? If it's just me and you, like, we're both the like type of people where we're gonna go tackle the world. We're gonna go out there, put ourselves out there. We're not afraid to make mistakes. But it's different when you have a family,
Right.
because when I saw how bad this affected my wife, and how disappointed she was, and how frustrated she was because I put us in such a financial bind on a monthly basis, it really did have an impact on our relationship. And we've always had a great relationship. But man, that really, really hit hard for us, because now all of a sudden, hey, we want to take family vacations, but you can't afford it.
Yep.
Hey, I want to get the kids this, I can't afford it. So had a lot of difficult conversations to manage through that process. So,
And that's the thing, I think, the X's and O's of the decision made are, they are what they are. I think, I want to go deep on the family impact and the emotional and the psychological impact that it has on a man, right? And this isn't just necessarily entrepreneurs. This can happen when you decide to make a career change. Maybe you're making good money in a career that you're just no longer passionate about. And you take a step back into a different industry and your pay gets cut, or you decide to start a business and things don't go well and you make a big dent in your savings. Or we've seen investors in the real estate space, empty out IRAs, 401ks, retirement plans, things like that, make investments that don't end up working out. What I don't think we hear enough about, because there's so much smoke and mirrors sort of on the internet about success, and everything you see most of the time on social media is it's like the 80-20, 80% of it's, how amazing everything is and look how successful I am. It's very fabricated. The other 20% is maybe real stories there. But what doesn't get talked about enough is the struggles that you kind of go through personally when this has happened, and how to pull yourself out of it. Because these decisions that we make that impact our family and ourselves personally have all kinds of downstream ripple effects. It's like a domino effect, right? It can ruin relationships. It can end marriages. It can lead to family separations. It can financially wipe you out, bankruptcy. It can really set you back emotionally and mentally. People need therapy. They need medication. Unfortunately, some people decide to do suicidal things like that, right? So we never wish that, or want to hear stories like that, but it's the reality of the matter. And I think as men, we have that natural sort of burden that society, and a good burden, but society has placed on us, and we have that natural, it's in our DNA. We're wired that way to feel the pressure of wanting to provide,
mhm.
wanting to be successful. If you do get a little bit of taste of success and you're looking around and your peers are doing really well, that weighs on you as well. So this is the part that I think that doesn't get talked about enough, and really has a burden on. So at that time, Cody, and you're talking about the impact it had with you and your wife, tell us a little bit more about that, and then tell us how you kind of clawed your way out of that. Because these types of situations, they're not overnight fixes. You don't just wave a wand. Yeah, you can file for bankruptcy and that kind of cleans things up here and there. But tell us a little bit more about how you clawed your way out of it, and your how you were feeling in the moment.
Sure. Well, let's start with the latter part of that. How did I feel in the moment? Not only did I feel like an utter failure, I felt like a disappointment. And I think that was the hardest thing for me to really kind of come to terms with, was feeling that feeling of disappointment. Like, I let my wife down, I let my family down, and I struggled with that. I had a hard time with that. And it came up in conversations throughout the years, especially as we were trying to get over that hump and recover. Just like anything else, sometimes in relationships, when you have disagreements, you have different things that, don't sit well with you, but sometimes you table it and you bottle it up. And then when there's times of stress, sometimes those things resurface and they come back and I mean, I admit to you that's what happened at times, and I'm very fortunate. My wife is somebody that is very, very level headed. She doesn't overreact sometimes to a fault, kind of can drive me crazy sometimes because I want you to react a certain way and she doesn't. But I say that to say is I was very blessed in that as disappointed as she was and as angry as I say she was realizing that at the end of it, I mean, at the end of those 10 years, I mean, it ended up costing me like 150 grand, all things considered. Um, she never, she never forgot that our relationship wasn't built around our finances. Our relationship was about the relationship that we had between each other. And I was very thankful for that because even though the financial struggles weren't easy and we were at one point like literally scraping pennies, man. We had a house, kids in school, but I was like, man, we were pretty close to being like we're in a bind here and we might have to make some very hard decisions. And so, but through all that, she said, look, how are we going to get through this? We need to immediately, let's work on a plan to start getting over it. Right. And I think that was really a turning point for me. It was like, okay, you can only lick your wounds for so long. You can only like get over your, frustration or disappointment for so long. Like you eventually have to start putting the puzzle pieces back together. I mentioned to you the few things that we did to turn that ship around, which took several years. We had to, like I said, work with a debt consultant to help us, improve my credit. We had to refinance those loans eventually after a few years to, consolidate that debt and get it to more manageable expenses every month. And once we started getting ahead after a few years and started kind of getting it contained or stop the bleeding, so to speak, I think things got a lot easier. But as far as like the lessons I've learned through that, there's so many that I could take away and share with you, but I would say the top, three or four or five that I've learned is number one is you have to have your financial house in order before you make any investment decision, right? Because like, man, any investment decision we make, it's going to come with risk, whether it's in the stock market, whether it's in real estate, in this case, in a business, everything is going to come with a burden of risk. So it's important that you have your financial house in order before you take on those big risks because you don't want to over leverage yourself and overextend yourself and not be able to absorb those times when things don't go well, which is going to happen to everybody, right? I would also say that you can't allow your passion to drive your decision making. And again, I mentioned to you my ego and my ambition clouded my judgment. And before looking at the objective facts, both on my own personal financial situation, but also, the lack of due diligence. This was a new startup franchise. It wasn't one that had been and existed with 100 plus units. This was a newer franchise that had its own inherent risk. Those were some things where if I looked at it objectively, I would have said, hey, this wasn't the right opportunity. Again, I mentioned to you a second ago, not over leveraging yourself. I can't overstate this one enough. When you leverage debt, I know this from the real estate world, like there's a way to leverage debt and do it in a way that's beneficial. There is definitely good debt and bad debt. In my case, leveraging all of these lines of credit and all this different debt well above the means that I could pay for, I overextended myself and I put myself into a position where I was in a huge negative cash flow monthly thereafter. And that's just not a very good position to be in. So if I would have understood my risks more, I would have been able to hedge my bets as well. Don't go all in. Don't try to hit that home run right out of the gate, which to me, this was. I felt like it was going to be that home run. I was like, oh, this is the ticket, like you said. And I think that if I'd understood the risk up front more and I'd have done more due diligence and I would have done a better analysis of my resources and the resources that I was trying to pull together to make this happen, I would have put better hedges in place, so to speak, against some of
Mm.
those risks. You know what I mean? Same thing applies to anything, any other investment that you do. And specifically related to this opportunity, I would tell you, franchises, I think, could be a great opportunity, especially if you don't have a business background and you're looking to rely on a proven business model with a proven business plan and a support system. Franchises, I think, are a great opportunity, but it's important to identify those that are established, that have been around for a while, that have a good support system, that have a great track record of success, multiple units. My case, this was not. They only had two corporate units that were open, and that was it. I was one of the very first franchisees that has signed on. And that is not a good position to be in, especially if it's your first business undertaking. So those are like the major lessons I learned along the way for sure. But man, there's so many more I could take from that. But go ahead.
And I think too, what I'm taking away from this too, and I know you and I've had some personal conversations too, that there's a silver lining here as well. There's a lot of lessons learned. We're labeling those hard lessons as well, but the reality is that these failures, and if you're listening to this episode or watching this episode, and maybe you're in this situation or you just came out of the situation, entrepreneurs often use these types of experiences. It's like tuition. It's like going to college. It's often very expensive, but using it as motivation, using it as a learning opportunity to understand what to do, what not to do, what to look out for. The reality is, I say kudos to you for doing it. Obviously, it was painful at the time and took you a long time to come out of it, but you learned some tremendously valuable experiences that you would have never learned standing on the sidelines. And that's the reality of entrepreneurship is there's a lot of people who say they want to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is glamorized online on social media. It's the sexy thing to do, but very few people are actually willing to step up to the plate, take a swing, hit something, and see where it goes. Is it a strikeout? Is it a foul ball? Did you get on base? Did you hit a home run? But if you're not going to step up to the plate and swing and take those risks, take those opportunities, you're never going to learn. So that you can, again, entrepreneurs' success is built on that mountain of missed opportunities or failures. Well, this was just your first one. It's just another opportunity that had you not done it, you wouldn't be as wise, and maybe you'd be doing it now and you're approaching 40 when it is a little bit. Maybe you would have some more financial resources, but you wouldn't have all these lessons to kind of lean on, and you would likely, if you did fail at a later stage in life, kind of just like ball up back into your hole and say, "Oh, that doesn't work." Like it's harder to do these types of things later in life. So I think there's definitely some silver linings here that I think a lot of people can take away from.
And I appreciate the opportunity to share it because I know there's many other people that have been in a similar circumstance, that have made a decision that maybe put them in a similar position, and it's caused a big burden on them personally or their family. And kind of to touch on that too is it's not just the financial experience you get from it or the entrepreneurial experience you get from it. Because to your point, now looking back 15 years later from that experience, I've learned so much from that. Like I've learned to be able to say no to a lot of opportunities that seem great on paper, but when you get into the bolts of it, you realize that, hey, this is not aligned with your financial goals. This is not aligned with your financial plan. This is not the right opportunity for you. So you kind of wise up as well in being able to be a little bit more cautious on which risk you take. But I do want to flip the script a little bit and talk about what you just mentioned earlier about the importance of the family dynamic and what I learned through this. And not that I needed a trial or tribulation to learn this, but going through it, what I realized is my wife is absolutely incredible. She is an amazing woman. She is so resilient and she's so patient, especially with me and some of my knucklehead decisions sometimes that, have cost us financially. And she, we have such a great relationship, and when you think about your wedding vows that you take, and I know it sounds kind of cheesy, right? But for better or for worse, like this was definitely one of the worst circumstances for us. But never came a point where I was ever worried where she was going to walk out the door and turn her back on me and leave me and let money come in between us. Was she disappointed with me? Absolutely. Was that hard to get through? Yes. But she never ever was willing to shut the door on me and say, I'm done with you. She always had my back. She was always supportive. And like I said, she said, hey, what do we need to do to get over this? And how do we get there as fast as we can? And we started putting the pieces back together. And so I've learned that, and I don't recommend testing anyone's relationship. Don't put your relationship through trials and tribulations on purpose. But what it did teach me was just the relationship that my wife and I have is really an unbreakable relationship. And I'm really, really thankful for that too, because I know without the shadow of a doubt, there's nothing that we can or can't go through where we won't have each other's back and we're not going to be there for each other. And I tie that back into, the original lesson here, which is it's okay. If I lose my shirt and something happens, at least I know that my family's going to be there. My wife is going to be there. I'm not going to put my family through that again, but it's just a great humbling reminder of just what's most important. And I'm really thankful for that test that we went through and that we got through it. And here we are.
Yeah, if anybody's listening that has a spouse at home that's supporting them through a situation like this, or maybe has in the past, I know after this recording, I'll go and tell my wife I love her and thank her again. But behind every successful entrepreneur is often a successful partner, because it's not easy. And not everyone has necessarily huge failures at the beginning. Some people do stumble upon a little bit of luck and end up having a really good base hit or home run kind of out the gate, but it doesn't mean it's easy. There's often a lot of late nights. There's often a lot of commitment, giving up weekends and nights and, friend affairs and family affairs. There's a lot of sacrifice that gets made in the relationship. There's often a lot of sacrifice that gets made financially, not doing things, not buying a house, not buying a car, not putting your kid in private school, whatever your thing is, you're saving money, kind of scraping things together to keep your dream alive, keep your business alive, or start that business in your dining room table. And that's really challenging to do when you're doing it by yourself. Having your spouse's support, whether he or she's in the business with you, is kind of irrelevant. But just having that emotional support and that mental support, that person who tells you, "Hey, it's okay," pick your head out of your sand and get back on the horse, right? Or somebody that tells you good job after a hard day's work, because entrepreneurs don't have a boss telling them good job, right, or congratulations or anything like that. Those little things can really make or break your psyche as a man. I know personally, like something I learned about myself quite a while ago, several years ago, was I like positive affirmations. I like when people tell me, "Hey, good job, Brian." And same, it's my wife knows that, and she does a phenomenal job trying to tell me that when things go well, and then of course she'll let you know when things aren't going well too as well. But regardless, with all that to say is that I think it's important that if you're gonna get into a business venture, that you have those tough conversations early. I think not that it wouldn't have happened if you had talked to your wife before, but maybe your road back to recovery would have been shorter, or maybe not as rocky if 25-year-old you and your lovely wife maybe had some of those harder conversations early. You were probably, I'm imagining, just drinking the Kool-Aid and so excited. And a lot of times our wives are very kind and they don't want to crush our dreams, even, and then they end up telling, I told you so, right? Which is
Yeah.
another conversation for another day. But I think having that reality check early and having those tough conversations can save you a lot of heartache.
It can. And it like you've already mentioned, it's such a great teacher, right? So what, in hindsight, looking back now over the last 15 years, 20 years of trying this, um, this was one of several financial shortfalls, right? This is one of several decisions that weren't fruitful. And going through this experience really, like I said, it made us battle tested. So that way, you know, not proud of like, hey, I had some other, decisions or investments that didn't go well, but it made us prepared for that. How do you handle that? How do you get through that? And it really made us battle tested. And I'm really thankful looking back that we were able to go through that experience earlier and kind of deal with those issues. She fully embraced this entrepreneur journey that we've taken on, and some of the risks that come along with that, but it's made her ironclad too, I feel like. And she understands that there's risk involved, but Like I said, as long as we're supportive of one another and that we're aligned in what we're trying to achieve, then that's what's most important. So to your point, I think it's important, guys, that for who is all of the fellows that are listening, you got to support your spouse. Make sure that you're being present and supportive of your spouse through the process. If they support you, great. That's awesome. They need to. You need to be in a strong relationship for sure. You need to have a strong partner backing you and supporting you. But it's important that you do your job and not just focus on your own ambition, but also making sure that you're supporting that spouse through that journey and making sure that you're communicating with your spouse through that journey and that you're at being willing to admit when you're wrong through those times. If you make a decision that, gee, just didn't really work out, you can't make excuses. It's not the world's fault. You got to take accountability. And I think sometimes that's what I've personally observed too is I think our wives expect us to be accountable for the decisions we make, good and bad. And I think that's important too. So taking ownership of the decisions we make and just making sure that you're not working in isolation. Your spouse is your partner. They're there to have your back. And it's important not to forget that.
There's another silver lining, and I'm just thinking about this now as an angle from a new father. Your kids are always watching, right? And ideally, of course, the struggles and the tough conversations and the challenges and maybe frustrations you have with each other. Ideally, a lot of that happens behind closed doors, at least most of it. Tension can sometimes be hard to hide, but kids are watching, mom and dad or mom or whoever's kind of pursuing entrepreneurial endeavors. They're watching you go out there and do hard things. And then there's a lesson in that. And there's a inspiration in that. I mean, these things that you've done, you may not realize it, Cody, but, you talk about your son and he's a small business owner now. He owns a growing company, and he's a young, a young dad, just like you were at that age, right? It's hard to say, and it's hard to measure the impact of him seeing you go through that, even though he didn't see all the successes and the wins and all these different things. It's hard to measure the positive impact and influence that had in in your son, and it probably will in your daughters as well down the road. And seeing dad do something bold, right? I think a lot of people, again, they play it safe, and there's nothing wrong with going to school, getting a good job, and all that. But I think a lot of us are meant to do more and have a desire to do more. And if you're one of those people that has a desire to do more and you have kids, you're inspiring them when you do things like this.
Hmm.
Even if you fail, it might be a failure financially. Maybe you lose some money, you ruin your credit, you file for bankruptcy. But guess what? When you die, none of that matters anyway. You know what I mean? It's like nobody's talking about your obituary like, man, Cody, poor guy, he had a couple of bankruptcies in his 90 years of living. Like, who cares? Nobody talks about that. But what they remember is you swinging for the fences. They remember you playing big. They remember you thinking big. They remember you trying to change your family tree by being entrepreneurial and starting a business, not because you're being selfish, but because you're truly doing it for them. So, and you may not end up finding that got tens of millions of dollars in my bank account. I started this amazing business, but guess what? Your next generation might, and it's from the inspiration of seeing you doing something. Like my dad was a small business owner and still is, and never had large financial success. At a very early age, I surpassed him in income, and I'm not saying that to brag by any means, but I would argue that while I maybe have some of my dad's bad habits, my wife will tell you I do, but also one of the things good habits I have is it's like, where did I get that entrepreneurial bug from? It's definitely from my dad. I got to watch him growing up, start businesses from scratch, and he often, probably to a fault, talked about money and finances and business at a young age. Probably stuff you wouldn't ideally, I would recommend you talk to a kid about, but that laid a foundation and planted a seed about going big, doing your own thing, being entrepreneurial, living life by your own rules, and that there's a positive impact there.
And what a great way to kind of summarize it because it's just a great reminder that we're on display every day. Our actions are on display every day with our families, with the people that we surrounded ourselves with. And you want to leave those around you feeling inspired and in a positive impact. And your kids obviously are the most important, to that. I appreciate you highlighting that, looking at my son's story and seeing him as a small business entrepreneur and kind of growing and such. I mean, to me, he's living the American dream. He's living the dream that I've been chasing for so long, and I'm so proud of him. And it's kind of nice. It's a nice reassurance that even though things didn't work out, at least it had a positive impact on him, and he's doing great things. And like I said, it's a good feeling when at least you can take a win from a hard situation like that. So I appreciate that. And so
Absolutely, absolutely. Great stuff, Cody. I appreciate you being vulnerable. These, things are often hard to share, but that's why we're here, right? Share stories between each other, things you've been through, things I've been through, things our guests have been through, to try to, as you mentioned the word impact a minute ago, try to have a positive impact. Remind people it may feel like doom and gloom in the moment. You might feel like your head's in the sand, you're in a dark place. I know I've been there, you've been there. But at the end of the day, we have to keep pushing forward. This is the burden that we feel as a man, the pressure we feel as a man. But there's a lot of people looking up to us. Our families are looking up to us. Our spouses are looking up to us. Our kids are looking up to us. And it's our responsibility to push forward and have that positive paradigm that even though things didn't work out well, there's a silver lining here. And as you mentioned, we're always on display. Somebody's watching. So be positive, find that silver lining, move forward. And good things tend to happen too when you have stories to share like this, because I think I found too, other people appreciate people that have been tested. If you find somebody that has allegedly, I don't think there's anybody out there, maybe they just don't share. If you find somebody that allegedly has only had success in life, they've only won. They don't know how to lose. They've never lost. They don't know what it's like to, as you mentioned earlier, rub two pennies together to kind of barely get by. People that haven't had those struggles and those trials and tribulations, I don't know. There's just something that is kind of a red flag to me. That seems like they're hiding something, because we know we've all been through that. So I love sharing these stories. I think they're very they're not fun to live in the moment, but they're definitely fun to kind of reflect on, and very powerful lessons to share with the audience. So
sure.
thanks for sharing.
Well, that's why we started the show, right? Is to be real, and like you said, the no BS filter. It's the real talk and the real life challenges that we go through every day and in our own lives and the lives as entrepreneurs. And that just means that you're in the hot seat next. So get ready.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, man. Well, until next time, let's get it.
All right. See ya.
Appreciate you being here with us. Stay connected by joining our weekly newsletter called The Forge, delivered straight to your inbox with thoughts on business, work, family, and becoming a better man. Make sure to check out forgingbettermen.com to sign up. If this show hits home for you, then hit the follow button and leave us a review to help us reach more guys who would benefit from it. This is Under Pressure.